You guys tell us the jump. We say how high. Emergency podcast time.
Yeah, and once the requests are coming in for an emergency pod, there's only one way we can go. We're not going to say no.
Don't say that, because there'll be some times where we might have to.
Well, but we won't be doing a pod, so we won't have to address it.
That's actually a very good point. This is an emergency Eagle Eye podcast presented by Nissan.
We need some special emergency podcast like music.
I'm Dave Zangaro. Yeah, we need sirens or something like that. Shaq Leonard is a Philadelphia Eagle. After watching that 49ers game, it was apparent how much the Eagles needed help at that position. And now they have a former three-time All-Pro on the team. Probably unfair to expect him to be that here. But what do you make of the signing, and how much do you think he'll help?
Two-time first-team All-Pro, one-time second-team All-Pro. But it's hard to tell. And even Nick, when we talked to Nick just a few minutes ago, was kind of muted. You know, he called him a depth piece. Christian Ellis played really well. He's just going to be like a depth. So I think he's kind of, covering himself in case it doesn't work out. But look, even if he's not physically what he once was, you would think just by intelligence and savvy and knowledge and experience, he'd be I would think a significant upgrade. Now, we've seen guys, and he's not an older player. I mean, he's 28, but physically, he's had back issues. And I don't know if there's anything harder for a football player to deal with than a back injury. I mean, I guess Achilles and stuff, but it's really hard. Something that's really hard to overcome. So I don't know what we're going to get. I think Nick doesn't really know what they're going to get. But I just don't see any downside. I mean, it's basically a 5-game contract. Sign him for the rest of the year, and it's a no-lose situation for the Eagles. It could help them. If it doesn't, you're no worse off.
Yeah, I agree with that. By the way, he is a 3-time first-team All-Pro. I had to look that up because it was bothering me, because I just wrote that he was a 3-time All-Pro, and I was like, I thought I got
you're right. 18, 20, 21. My bad.
Yeah. You scared me there for a second. I was getting ready to make that correction in the story, but no, 3-time All-Pro. But you're right. I mean, he's not that guy right now. He wasn't. There's a reason he's available, and I think you have to be realistic about that. But I mean, we watched the game on Sunday. Everyone who's listening to this watched the game. I'm sorry about that. They had to watch it, but you watched the game on Sunday. They needed help. I mean, and even if he's not great, he has to be better. And they had to get depth somehow. I mean, they entered this game with 3 guys at the position, and one of them has never played defense in the NFL before. So, they needed to do something.
And the other one played like he's never played defense.
Yeah, and look, like I posted a Pro Football Focus. While I don't like their grades, I think their raw data is helpful. It was a bad day in coverage for Nick Morrow. We saw it on the field. The numbers back that up. And it's not like, I don't want to pick on Nick Morrow. I think that's a really tough position to be in. I think it's about the roster construction at linebacker. And I think it is fair to question Howie about it a little bit. In general, like, I agree with philosophically the way he's put this team together. You invest in the trenches and you go from there, but kind of an extreme this year at linebacker, The only real early free agent acquisition was Nick Morrow, a guy that the team he was on upgraded twice to get him out of there. And then they were really relying on Nakobe Dean, which I don't blame them for as much, but that was their only option. And now it's come back to bite them a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I actually just wrote about that. I have a column going later in the week about how, I philosophically, I agree with building through the trenches, but he might have overdone it. He might have overcompensated a little bit. And I don't think you need to keep drafting linebackers in the first round, but you have to have functional guys there. And they don't. They just don't. And look, Nick Morrow hasn't been bad. Most of the year he's been okay. I think Zach Cunningham, obviously they missed him, but they didn't miss him 23 points worth. So there aren't a lot of options. Where after the trade deadline, there's just not guys sitting on the street. They brought in Cunningham, 10 days into training camp, and Miles Jack. Cunningham worked out. I think he's been decent this year, but yeah, there's no depth at all. I think Ben Van Sumeren had a great preseason game and should be a pretty good special teamer. He's played some special teams on his 3 call-ups, and yesterday, but there's just not a lot there, and it's almost like how he wanted to see like how far he could take it with linebackers. All right, we're gonna have some late round picks here and some guys off the scrap heap, and all right, we're gonna have like 3 guys that we cut as our 3 off ball linebackers, and it kind of caught up to him. Now, it's hard to be super optimistic about Shaq just because the Colts benched him, then they cut him. He's had the back surgery. His production was non-existent when he did play. I think he played 9 games for the Colts this year. Didn't have any big plays. When you look at his history, he was just a guy that was so active and around the ball. And the kind of interesting aspect of it is the Shane Steichen, Nick Sirianni. Like, what was that conversation like? You just cut this guy, and obviously Nick has a relationship with Shaq too from their years together in Indy. But there's just a lot of it's almost like the Eagles were like, we don't have any other options. Let's just do it. And it's not going to cost them much money. It's hard for me. And I could very well be wrong, but it's hard for me to envision Shaq Leonard making a huge difference.
I think it'll help though.
We'll see. I don't think he can hurt. How much he helps, I guess. I think he will help. I'm curious to see. Look, it takes a while just to learn the defense, just to get comfortable, to know your coaches and the calls and your teammates. There's only 5 games left to end the postseason. And look, they have a lot of guys. When you look at it, like Zach Cunningham came in late into camp, Reuben and Byard came in, during the season. They've just, like half the defense is guys who weren't even here at the start of training camp. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but you keep adding these older, it's kind of an older defense, and that's just a little scary. You just keep adding all these pieces that, we'll see if they fit together. But maybe you're right. Maybe he will help. And I'm sure he'll help to some extent. I'm just not confident it's going to be a significant or a dramatic difference.
I don't think that's what I have in mind, but I think he's better than the alternative. And I think as far as an option out there on December 4th, it's a pretty attractive one. There's
as good as you're going to get at this point.
Pretty much. I'm curious to see if he'll be able to make some plays. I know Nick Sirianni talked about his length and how that kind of helps in the pass game. And I just looked it up while you were talking. Shaq Leonard and Zach Cunningham have the exact same arm length. They're both known as being long guys, 34 3/8. That's exceedingly long for a linebacker. So maybe the 2 of them together is going to clog up some passing lanes. I think that's probably the hope. And I do think that he's going to be this team's starting middle linebacker.
In Dallas?
Maybe not in Dallas. I think he's going to play in Dallas. And I know that we just talked to Nick Sirianni in the press conference, so he kind of walked us through a lot of their thinking with Shaq Leonard. But and he mentioned that, some positions are different. Some positions you can kind of play immediately and others take time. But based on their history this year, they brought in Byard, he played right away. They brought in Reuben, he played right away. I see no reason why Shaq Leonard wouldn't play against the Cowboys on Sunday. Now, it might be a rotation, and it's a position where they've rotated this season already. We saw when Nakobe was back after the IR stint, it was him, Morrow, and Cunningham rotating. So I think we could see a rotation in this game, but Shaq Leonard's going to play, and if he looks okay, I would think the plan would be to have him starting at the mic, and then you'd have Zach Cunningham next to him.
Yeah, that makes sense. Certainly. We don't know Zach Cunningham. We assume he's going to be healthy and he'll be okay for Sunday.
Well, I don't know about Sunday. I know like they didn't put him on IR and it's a hamstring injury, so
yeah,
he'll be back at some point.
Yeah, well, they need to win Sunday. I mean, kind of important game. I'm really curious to see.
Hamstrings don't work that way.
What's that?
Hamstrings don't work that way.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying they could sure use him.
Yeah.
I understand that a coach can't overrule a hamstring. But especially with, if you're going to give him 30, I don't know, what do you think is a good number, 25, 30 snaps?
Sure.
You probably want Zach Cunningham out there, certainly. And I'm kind of with you. I don't blame Christian Ellis in his first NFL start. He's going to get up against, an incredible array of weapons. And I don't even blame Nick Morrow that much because he's played pretty well this year.
He's played above expectation most of the year.
Yeah. And look, we've lavished so much praise on Howie, and he's deserved it. I mean, he's built 2 Super Bowl teams in 6 years, and 10-1, 10-2 after a Super Bowl is kind of unprecedented. I mean, his team is really, really good. They do have a good roster, but I just think he has neglected the position. And and again, I think the Nakobe thing. I don't know what he would have given this team if he was healthy, but they miss him just to some extent.
Yeah, they kind of put all their eggs in the Kobe basket, and it didn't work out.
Yeah, they did. Interesting. I mean, I think it's hard to come in. I mean, he'll practice Wednesday. Shaq will, and
I doubt he will because I don't think the team's practicing on Wednesday. I would think they're having a walkthrough.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's practice.
Okay.
They actually run like 20 more plays at a walkthrough than a real practice.
Mm-hmm.
They actually they run like close to 70 plays in a walkthrough. But he'll be out there. He'll be out there practicing, even though it's not officially a practice.
Thank you.
I'm really curious to see what he has left. Not left because he's a young guy, but
no, I think that's the right term.
Yeah,
because he's a young man in terms of age. But he's not what he was. And man, he was a fun player in his prime.
He was really, really good.
I think it's like almost dismissive to call him one of the best linebackers in the league during that stretch because he was one of the best defensive players in the league during that stretch.
And for people who, let me just run some numbers real quick. From 18 to 21, which are his 4 healthy years with the Colts, the 4 years he made either All-Pro or the Pro Bowl all 4 years. This is incredible. He had 17 forced fumbles, 30 pass deflections, 11 interceptions, 15 sacks. I mean, the numbers are crazy. 30 tackles for loss, 20 quarterback hits. I mean, that's historic type of stuff, historic production.
Yeah.
He was one of the best defensive players, period, in the league during that stretch.
We'll get to talk to him this week, but why do you think he signed with the Eagles?
I'm guessing what he'll tell us is his relationship with Nick and other people in the building.
Yeah, I think that goes a long way. I was hoping you'd say, well, that guy I saw on TV picked me up at the airport, and then he got kicked out of a game, and I thought that was pretty cool. So I decided to come here.
Yeah. Well, I can guarantee 2 things. The first 2 people that Shaq Leonard sees when he gets off the airplane are going to be Dom and John Clark.
That's probably true.
But it's a good question. I'm curious how he'll answer. I really like Nick's comment the other day. He said, "What did you tell me?" Nick said, go where you feel is right. Go where you feel like is the right place for you. And he didn't try to hard sell him. He just said, and I think that makes the player comfortable. And but I think that's what it was. We know Nick's big on connections and relationships, and that stuff comes in handy. You're Shaq Leonard, and I mean, I don't know if he has a relationship with anyone in Dallas, with McCarthy or anybody down there, but when you have an offensive coach who is connected with a defensive player in their years together, that makes a difference.
Yeah, and it wasn't just Nick. He told a story that he was FaceTiming with Shaq Leonard last week, and then he passes the phone to Marcus Brady, who was there in Indy. And then he passes it to Kevin Patullo, who was there. So he's going to come in here and have Jason Michael, who was tight ends coach. So he has a bunch of people he knows here already. And, veterans in this league know each other too. And the Eagles have built a really strong reputation in terms of being a place that players want to be.
That's true. And they win. I mean, as bad as that, as bad as Sunday was, they still have the best record in football, and that means something.
Yeah. Do you think Howie last night called him hey, Shaq, we could really, really use you?
I wonder if Nick just told Howie, look, don't call him. I think he's going to come here. So just don't overdo it. I don't know. We'll find out. I assume we'll talk to him Wednesday. If not Wednesday, then Thursday. But yeah, it's a fun move because I'm under no illusions that he is who he used to be, and who knows, maybe he could get there someday. Who knows where he'll be next year? But yeah, at the very, very least, he's better than what they have.
Yeah, and look, I think that's the most important thing to do here is to keep it all in perspective. I think there are some issues with this defense that will not be solved this year. They're going to have to work around. And
there's no question.
I think up front, they have some dynamic players. They're old in the back seven. I don't think they have the speed or athleticism that they once did back there. So I think going forward, there are things in the offseason how he's going to have to address, but there's not a perfect roster in the NFL. So every team has areas where they're a little deficient, and it's about trying to prop them up as best you can. And we'll see how the Eagles are able to do that, or if they're able to do that. I
still think the Eagles' best pass defense down the stretch might be the offense. Just try to be better on third down, try to score more points and hold on to the ball and run. That's how they were really good earlier in the season. Mm-hmm. Those 40-minute time of possessions, keep that defense off the field as much as possible.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you have to kind of lean into your strengths, and that needs to be one of them. It needs to be the offense kind of carrying them at times, and the defensive line. They have to be consistently great for this thing to work. We've seen that in spurts. They've been great, but they need to do it for an entire game, and they haven't been able to do that all year.
I made a list of snap counts, defensive snap counts by Eagles players, 26 or under, defensive backs and linebackers. So Reed Blankenship obviously is number one, 681. And I think he's a good, solid player you can build around. Who's next on that list? Terrell Edmonds.
Ooh.
And then Josh Jobe, then N'Kobe, then Sidney Brown, then Eli Ricks and Christian Ellis, then Nolan Smith, and Mario Goodrich, Mekhi Garner, Josiah Scott. And out of all those guys, look, Sidney Brown might become a starter. He might not. I mean, I think with some teams, you look at some of the young guys, like this guy's going to be, and out of all those guys, I don't know if any of them that, you can say he's definitely going to be, you hope N'Kobe becomes a above average, good starter. You hope Sidney does. I don't know about any of these guys. I don't know Keely Ringo is going to be a starter. So when you start looking toward the future with this defense, and then you look these guys like Byard and Roby and Shaq and all those type of guys are stopgaps. They're not guys you build around. They're all in their 30s. Shaq's 28, but maybe physically he's in his 30s. But it's a little scary. It's a little scary. Look, offensively, they have so many studs who are young. 26 and under, if that's the age group, Devontae and Cam Jurgens and Jalen and Swift's 24. And I should mention Josh Sweat is 26. You think of him as being around forever. Up front, they have plenty of young guys, but that secondary and linebacker spot is just like in terms of young talent, it's just void. Concern.
Yeah, it is. They'll hopefully piece this together a little bit down the stretch. I think it is important to know that the guys they've brought in during this season haven't been great. Like, they've been okay. I think Roby's been fine when he's been out there. Probably like to see more of him. Byard hasn't been as advertised.
Been okay.
Julio, I think, the name Julio brought more excitement than the player at this point, but he's been pretty much a non-factor. So, yeah, keep that in mind when we're talking about what Leonard can do. And I'm so proud of myself that I've called him Shaq every time.
Not Darius?
Yeah.
Well, he was good when he was Darius.
I don't know if there's a causation there.
Yeah, probably not. And I just wonder also, kind of along the lines of what you're just saying, if there's just so many of those guys, those older guys they brought in during the season. It's not the ideal way to build a team. And I think they're all character guys. I think they're all the risk sometimes is you bring in you bring in these guys and they don't have a connection to that uniform and the team. They're just trying to make a few bucks, get a few more paychecks. That's the concern. I don't think that's the case here. They all seem like good guys who care and put in the work and
who they fit in.
They fit in
from what I've observed.
Yeah. But I just think it's very tough to when they get to training camp next year, they're going to have another whole new defense. Half these guys are going to be here. Yeah. So that's just tough to do every year.
It is. All right, let's take a break and then we'll wrap up this emergency pod on the other side.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store at nissanusa.com today.
Celebrity cook Steve Martorano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martorano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations at Martorano's Prime on Open Table. If you're one of these people who listens to the Eagle Eye podcast every week, multiple times a week, and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a pretty good time to do that. Wherever you get your podcast, please rate, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review. We really do appreciate that. And our Facebook page, the NBC Sports Philadelphia Facebook page, or not Facebook page, YouTube channel, reached 100,000 subscribers.
Yeah, and then it went down under, went to 99,000. Somebody canceled.
That's not
it's back over now.
That's not true. But we asked on a recent pod for you guys to do that, and you guys came through. So we really do appreciate that.
Yeah. Anything from we did talk to. We'll just get a little off topic here. I thought Nick had some really interesting things about the rushing offense, the running game. When we talked to him earlier today, Monday, which you don't really hear him say too much. I mean, he said we got to run the ball more. I mean, he said we got to do it more and we got to be better at it. Mm-hmm. That was interesting to hear. Yeah,
a pretty stark contrast from a few weeks ago when I asked him about the run game, and he acted like it was a crazy idea that they weren't running the ball well. And honestly, they've run the ball better since then in some games. But it was against the 49ers. I understand the thought process because they probably thought, hey, we're going to have to put up points. We think we can throw against this team. But it did get out of balance a little bit.
Yeah. And look, they weren't doing it well early, and they seem to get away from it pretty quickly when it's not going well. And we saw a lot of Gainwell, and he talked about why. But the bottom line is when this team runs the ball, and I know the stats can be deceiving because when you're up big, you're going to run the ball at the end of games. So, those stats, like every time they run the ball 30 times or more, they're undefeated. That's because they're running the ball because they're up 30-7 or whatever it is. They haven't really been up 30-7 this year over anyone, but you know what I mean. But the bottom line is, and he even said, it takes some pressure off Jalen to be able to run the ball better. They've been really up and down. And the way they started the season running, I just thought it was going to be like, a real staple of this offense.
It should be. I mean, there's no reason it shouldn't be with that offensive line, with Swift, who at times this year has looked excellent, and even Gainwell, who, like, if he's a number 2, I think you feel pretty good about him. So in general, their philosophy is always going to be pass to set up the run. We've seen that work for them, but the fact that Nick admitted they need to establish the run a little bit, which is my favorite phrase because it's like a divisive phrase at this point, but like the fact that he admitted that and that he admitted that the run game hasn't been as effective as it needs to be, I think is notable. And it might actually mean that we see it.
Yeah, we'll see if that turns into anything. You could take it as a criticism of the play calling.
You could, but I also think Nick is, not in terms of like down to down play calling, but when they go into a game, like they philosophically have an idea of what they want to do.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I also think, and I don't think Brian Johnson's done a bad job this year. I think he's, for the most part, done a pretty good job, but he has shown a tendency to get away from the run. Mm-hmm. More than, it's like almost Andy Reid-esque with Westbrook and Deuce back in the day. It's like the difference is Andy would get away from it when they were doing well. Brian Johnson seems to get away from it very quickly when it's not going well. I think Swift was 4 for 8 in the first half and had 2 more carries. We'll see. Obviously, a lot's going to have to do with how the games are going. If you're down, if you're down big, you're going to get away from it. But I also think if you're down 10 in the third quarter, you don't abandon the run. You keep running your offense.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially because we think it can be such a big weapon for them.
Yeah, they have good backs.
They do. I agree. Not great backs, but good backs.
Not great backs. I think the room is very good. I think I think they have. We haven't seen enough of Penny to even have an opinion, but I think they have 3 above average backs who can, if they're used properly, can be good weapons.
Okay. Anything else from Nick?
I don't think so.
He mentioned that he hasn't heard yet from the NFL about the Dom situation. Adam Schefter reported the league is looking into it. Look, I think there's a chance the league does act in some way because they're very cognizant of like making sure about precedent and look, a non-player can't touch players.
What if they ban Dom from going to the airport to pick up free agents?
I don't think they have that power.
No,
I think they have a very limited scope of their power, and it's on that football field.
The NFL, in conjunction with Philadelphia International Airport authorities, has ruled that.
No, I don't believe that the Philadelphia Airport can get anything done. So
they remodeled it, upgraded it somewhat.
They did.
They did Terminal F.
They're trying.
Yeah,
that's all you can ask.
Pretty bad.
But we'll see what happens there. I think there's a chance something comes down. Nick did reiterate that Dom was trying to defuse the situation. We know what they think of him. So just a bizarre storyline and something I never thought we'd be covering, but it happened.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But
do you think Nick was? We were talking before the press conference. Do you think Nick was appreciative that the Eagles got the deal done with Shaq Leonard before his press conference?
I would think so.
Yeah, because it's like you just lost 42-19 to a team that can now claim they're the best team in your conference. You get embarrassed at home. but a lot of the questions end up being about Shaq Leonard, which is right. I mean, it's an addition that people want to know about, but the timing helped Nick a little bit.
It did. Took a little pressure off him. I was disappointed I didn't have a chance to ask. Sometimes you're really kind of like, you have two things you want to ask. You're only going to get one question.
Yeah. So if people don't realize this, like it's a video conference on day after games these days. It's one of the few holdovers from the COVID years, but it's you're going to get a question, but it's like you kind of just raise your hand virtually and wait, and you're probably not getting a second question. So, yeah. And for me, like today, I ended up first, and you kind of feel the obligation to ask about the big news. So, ask about Shaq Leonard, and there it is.
Yeah, I think I was fourth, maybe, and so I wanted to either ask about like a general defense question or about I wanted to give him a chance to follow up on what he said post game about why Jalen was still in the game with 2.5 minutes left, down 23 points, and we're not going to stop fighting, which I just don't get. And nobody did end up asking him that. Which, I was curious to see if he would back off that a little bit and say, look,
because to me it was a really bad look.
Really bad look. And then he didn't know the score, he's called it a 2-possession game. And I understand that he's talking to us like 10 minutes after the game's over. And I get that there's a lot going through his mind as he's on overload. And he didn't know the score. That's fine. But by today, I thought maybe he'd have a more measured response about it. I just didn't get to ask it.
Yeah. I think that's still a fair question on Wednesday, by the way.
I think so too. Especially, because we didn't get to answer it, and he'll have an extra couple days to think about it. I'm guessing he regrets it, and I think he was just so fired up after that game. He didn't.
Will he admit that?
I think
he's admitted fault before. Like he's said before, like I in hindsight I wouldn't. Like he has done that on occasion.
Yeah, I think he will.
Interesting.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. What number do you think Shaq Leonard wears here?
Oh, I don't know. What do you wear in Indy?
53.
53? Yeah. Nigel Bradham has that, so you can't wear that.
54 is available. 58's available. 59's available. 59 kind of stinks. I think 54.
59 stinks?
Yeah, it's not a great number.
Seth Joyner wore 59.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's a good number.
All right, if you want to say Seth wasn't a good player, that's up to you.
That is not what I said. I'll have Seth knocking on my door. Seth made it look good. I don't think it's an aesthetically pleasing number.
See, I don't get any of that. I just don't get that. It's a number.
I'm aware that it's a number.
It's a number. Why?
Why? With the affinity for numbers as you have,
numbers that have meaning.
You see them in such a limited scope.
Well, why does? But I don't. I mean, the numbers that that interest me stand for something, like a stat that's amazing. The actual aesthetically pleasing characteristics of a number, that's what I don't get. Why is 54 more aesthetically pleasing for a linebacker number than 59? Well, I just don't get that.
It's an inexact science, but I'm right.
No, you're not. You're so wrong on this. And I know everyone's going to disagree with me because sports fans are into that stuff. They're into jerseys and numbers. I'm not.
Yeah. How dare they find joy in numbers, unlike you.
I just don't get it.
So you're telling me DeAndre Swift doesn't look good in that number 0?
If he played more, maybe I'd have a better sense of how he looked. 4 carries, I'm not sure. I just don't care about that stuff.
How do you feel about scoregami?
Couldn't care less.
No?
Nope.
All right. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast and you like fun, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube,
I do a weekly stats columm. I mean, it's my favorite thing to do.
Because those numbers and subscribe there.
Value and context.
Well,
I don't write in my stats column, 54 is better than 59.
I'd read it then.
No, you wouldn't.
That's probably true. All right. That's it. For Reuben, I'm Dave. This was just a bonus podcast. We'll be back with you for the normal schedule this week. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you soon.